privilege and so grateful to share in this occasion with you and to recognize these dear folks that have been so tireless in their efforts for life. And it is a real honor for me to be able to share on this occasion. And thank you, each and every one of you, for all you do for the cause that is on God's heart, because He is the author of all life. And this afternoon, I have had just a thought on my mind I'd like to share with you. It has to do with the image of God. The image of God. And I know people get nervous when a Baptist pastor walks the platform with a Bible in his hand. And they put a headset on it. Usually that means a weak sermon. Baptist pastors walk more when their sermons are the weakest, it seems. That's my experience. But I do just have a few thoughts to share with you, because what undergirds everything that we are gathered to remember today, beneath all efforts, whether they're political, whether they're local, any form that they take, beneath all that you have worked for, and beneath all that this day is about, is that which is sacred. It is not political. It is absolutely theological. It's about God Himself. It is the image of God that undergirds everything that we do, everything we believe about the cause of life. Genesis 1:27. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created him. This is a good season to remember the image of God. I was thinking about it this week. As a matter of fact, I shared with our own church family at West Park this morning that today and tomorrow are really days when we should be thinking about the image of God and how the image of God should impact our lives and our actions in our society. Tomorrow is a holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, as his life is commemorated. And today has been set aside on this Sunday as a holy day. Sanctity is Human Life Sunday. And as I think about these 2 days that come together, today and tomorrow, I think that both of them, in a very, very unique way, remind us about the image of God. I think both of these days remind us of the awful things that can happen when people do not see other people as the image of God. Sometimes the greatest injustice is done by that lack of recognition that every person bears the image of God. And sad to say, my friends, sometimes the greatest injustice is carried out by those who are supposed to represent justice. And in our country, sometimes the greatest injustice has been articulated by people who were supposed to be the supreme justice. I wonder if I might just share 5 photographs with you that might help us think about this day and the next day and what the issue is really all about. The image of God. The image of God. First picture I'd like you to see here is a picture of a Supreme Court Justice. That's Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the years prior to the American Civil War and during the first few years of the American Civil War. One day, a case came to be heard in the Supreme Court. It was a case dealing with this man. His name is Dred Scott. Dred Scott was a slave. And he was taken by his master into one of the free states in the north for an extended period of time. And so he went to the court system of our country in order to express that he should be a free man because he had lived in free states. Well, the case went through the court system here in the United States and finally came to the Supreme Court. And the decision was made that we know as the Dred Scott decision. And in that decision, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Roger Taney, said that Dred Scott had no rights whatsoever under the Constitution of the United States. That he was just a piece of property, like a table, or a chair, or a cow. That he was really not a human being. And that none of the laws in our country that protect human beings and life itself, none of those pertain to Dred Scott. Well, because of that, of course, there was just a greater polarization in our country. In a few years, that Dred Scott decision led in a great way toward the dreadful conflict that came to our country, the American Civil War. 4 years' time, 1 out of every 30 Americans died. 1 out of 30. It led to destruction, north and south. It led to terrible, terrible alienation of families, communities. It led to repression. It led to decades and generations in our country, north and south, where there was government-sanctioned racism, and sadly all too often, church-sanctioned racism. That the white race and the black race were not equal. Black Americans were not to be afforded the rights of true human beings made in the image of God. There was a man we celebrate his life tomorrow. A pastor, a minister, a Baptist minister, who was willing to publicly, personally oppose what was recognized as the law of the land. He challenged people who believed in the image of God across the nation to non-violent opposition to what was considered to be right and proper. And tomorrow we recognize the life, the legacy, the sacrifice, the impact of one man who was willing to stand saying all people are made in the image of God. And people are not to be, as he said, judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. There was another decision by a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He articulated it. 40 years ago, this Chief Justice here, Warren Burger, wrote the decision for the Roe versus Wade case. And in that decision, much of the thinking, much of the philosophy of the decision was based on the same concepts as the Dred Scott decision over 100 years before. And what Roe versus Wade said was, if you look at this picture, it said this is a piece of property. Next picture, please. This unborn baby is a piece of property. This baby, at times, is an inconvenience. This really is a medical condition. This is not a human being. And according to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, this child is